Welcome to the MSL 411, a podcast designed to equip both aspiring and experienced MSLs with the resources they need to level up their career toolkit. The heart of this podcast is to take the same industry knowledge and advice that we share with our own candidates and make it available and accessible to anyone looking for answers. So if you have questions, you've come to the right place. We're here to give you the 411. And without further ado, let's dive right in.
Hey, welcome back to the MSL 411 podcast. We are very excited. This is our first time having an outside of SemBio guest on the podcast. And I have the pleasure of inviting somebody I got to place in her last MSL role. And she has now been promoted into a leadership role. And so I wanted to invite her on to talk a little bit about leadership, what that looks like, what the process is getting into that role, because whether you're an aspiring MSL trying to break into your first MSL role, or maybe you're one now that has aspirations for leadership, I think Angela will have some advice or some tidbits to share about her experience. So Angela, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Ashley. It's great to be here.
We are so excited to have you. Linda and I have some questions stored up for you, but I'll just kind of kick it off asking you to introduce a little bit about yourself, about your background in industry, and a little bit about what you're doing currently.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So, I am a PharmD by training, and I really feel like everything I've done in my career has really prepared me to move into medical affairs. I did several years of clinical practice, which I really enjoyed, but at the same time, I felt like there was more that I wanted to do, and I wanted to have an impact on patient care at a kind of a higher level or broader level. So that kind of led me to discovering the MSL role, and through that, I joined the MSL Society and attended some conferences just to really start better understanding what this role is, what are my chances of getting into this role, what skills do I need to be able to transition. And so I was very fortunate in that I got my first opportunity with a small company named Alimera Pharmaceuticals, where it was a great environment for a first-time MSL, and really got to wear a lot of hats at the smaller company, really learned what I wanted to do with my career, which, then when you reached out to me, I think it was over 3 years ago, hard to believe, and we started talking about the opportunity that I currently have. I was brought in as an MSL in ophthalmology again, and from there just continued to learn and was on a phenomenal team where it was a great culture to continue to learn, to develop, and through that I had the opportunity to move into a director role. So I'm now the director of the field medical team West region, and it's really a great opportunity to have some of my colleagues that I was peer with, and now I'm their leader, which is exciting. We're expanding the team, so it's really a great opportunity, I think, for me to continue to grow and develop, and this is where I want to be. So this is the director role, and I feel like that's my calling.
I am so excited. This is something that you and I have talked about this, that you didn't necessarily anticipating happening so quickly, but it did, which is so exciting. And I think I would love to work for you. So I think whoever else may be joining your team, it sounds like you guys are expanding. They will certainly be blessed to get a chance to work with you, because you're a fantastic person, so kind, so generous, and really, I know that you will be a fantastic advocate for your people, which we will get into later. But I wanted to first kind of kick this off and ask a little bit about your vision for your career. Was leadership always where you saw it ending up eventually, saw your medical affairs career ending up eventually?
Actually, no. And that's kind of the funny part about this is I was very happy as an MSL. I love the role. It's just, it's such a fascinating role and fulfilling as well. And I think my answer, did I want to move into leadership and medical affairs? The initial answer was no, because prior to pharma, I'd been in 2 different leadership management roles. And after each one, I was like, I'm never doing that again. And like, what they say about never say never. Yep. But I did say never. And, now with, the perspective of some time and distance, I realized I just really wasn't set up for success in those roles. And so with that, my manager, when I came to Regeneron, had asked, kind of those conversations like, have you considered, would you be interested? We kind of see, I see this skill set in you. And at first when the conversation came up, I just quickly changed the conversation. But then, just through kind of repeated conversations and having the opportunity to take the time and reflect, where I'm at, what I want, and start just doing some, exploring of the topic, then I realized that this is really where I want to be. And I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity to move into a leadership role.
Well, I have a question for you actually on that, because I know a lot of the people that are watching or maybe listening are kind of in your former shoes, where they're in the MSL role, maybe considering leadership or looking to get into that. And were there steps that you took in the field medical role that prepared you for this leadership position? And if so, what do they look like?
Yeah, once I kind of started listening to my manager, really getting more into those conversations about, I think this is really where I want to move to when the right opportunity presents itself. With that, my first goal was just to continue to excel in my current MSL role and to learn as much as possible, because there's so many facets to the MSL role that I felt if I was going to be leading people, I wanted to have as much experience and understanding of the role that I could, because that'd be the best benefit to my team. So I really did that. And then I have an external mentor that I've been working with, for I think 4 years now. And he had always suggested leadership to me. And again, I was like, no, I want to be a trainer. And he'd be like, no, you should be a leader first. You can always move into training. And I was like, no. But then, it started coming around. So I reached out to him. And I think it's important if you have a mentor or two to reach out and, talk to him, the pros, the cons. Am I ready? What do I need to do to get ready? He recommended some books for me to read. At the same time, I used LinkedIn Learning, found some great courses on leadership, on management, on coaching that I went through to really kind of build my skills. And with that, I also identified an internal mentor, so someone within my company, but outside of my therapeutic area, so I could get a better understanding of the role from someone else and really ask those questions that maybe I didn't want to ask, within my own team and my own area. And I think that helped. And then as I got more serious about this, I was very fortunate to have some opportunities to kind of sit in on some conversations, see some of the other aspects of the director role that maybe I wasn't aware of. And that also allowed me to consider, is this really what I want to do? Do I want to continue pursuing this? So I think all of that together, and I had the luxury of time, I feel like, to really explore this and move and prepare myself for it.
Fantastic. We'll have to get the names of those books.
Yes. What would you say was the book that really stuck out in your mind? Or maybe it was one of the classes that you really loved?
The book that everybody recommends is The First 90 Days, which is really a good book, because, it's all about the first 90 days when you move into a leadership role is so important, because that really sets the tone, and that's when people are really judging you the most. And so you want to start off on a positive note. A couple books that I read, I think just for my own well-being, is Radical Candor and How to Say Anything to Anyone, because I think in leadership, it's having those tough conversations at times. And so I wanted to also understand about that and how best to prepare for those conversations. So those are probably the 3 go-to books that I have dog-eared and highlighted and kind of refer to when I need.
Yeah, you're giving us some homework. I like it. Linda will probably be taking notes for the Symbio Book Club.
Yes, we love book recommendations here. Thank you.
Yes. Are you a book reading kind of person, or are you an audiobook gal, or both?
I really love to read the book.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. I have a lot on my Kindle, but if I can have a hardback book in my hands, that is it, with my little highlighter, my pencil to write notes in the margins. That's really, so I'm very old school when it comes to books.
Oh, I am the same. I like having a physical copy in my hands.
Exactly.
Yep.
There's something about the feel, the smell. I just love it.
Yeah.
The chair, I have my reading chair, the special chair that I always do my reading in. I'm absolutely that person. So
Nice.
well, I have to add a couple of these that I haven't read before to my list. So thanks for the tips, and I'm sure our listeners will appreciate them also.
Yes.
Were there, to kind of build on what you were talking about, you mentioned how you were reaching out to different people within your organization, working with your mentor to kind of really suss out, if this is the right fit for me. Were there specific things that you did just independently, as far as like work or projects or things that you raised your hand for within your team that you felt like, okay, once I started really getting serious about this is a path forward for me, different things that you may have raised your hand for that, you know, a year ago you wouldn't have thought to, because that wasn't really the track that you were going down. Was there anything like that really in your?
Yeah, I think there were opportunities, and early on, I took on a project without realizing the magnitude of it, and I think that's really what helped prepare me for this. And it's just something when I started, I thought, our onboarding process can be a little bit better. Because coming from a small company to a much larger company, the small company I would just always call HR because it was so small and like, hey, who do I ask for this? And it was like a family. So I'd always be easy to get to who I needed or the information that I needed. But going to a larger company, it's a little bit harder to do that. So I kind of created what was initially called the new hire guide. And now it's more of a field medical guide, but I tried to create where everything is in one place and not realizing kind of the magnet, the effect that would have not only on our therapeutic area, but shared with other therapeutic areas. So I think that might have been the first project that I took on without really knowing that it would set me on the path kind of to move into leadership or be identified as someone identifying a gap, addressing it, and then really getting the kind of visibility with that. But kind of to your question, what I did was I knew I was weak in clinical trial understanding just with my background. I hadn't had that much opportunity, and so there was an opportunity. I was given 2 projects. And both were very attractive, but I knew if and one was easier than the other, but I knew if I moved into a clinical trial that would really challenge me, but it would also allow me to grow the most and have a better understanding of another part of the MSL role. So I kind of took that on.
Yeah, really diversify the skill set that you could bring. And then, as you transition into leadership, being able to help somebody else walk through that challenge that they may experience because you had personal experience with it. So kind of moving into the topic of actually getting the role and interviewing the role, we are always talking to people who express an interest in leadership about, raising their hands for those opportunities, kind of like you just described. But once they put the pen to paper and actually start pursuing the interview process, or maybe they're put up for a promotion within their own organization and are in the mix of the interview process, one of the questions that comes up in these promotion type interviews is going from a peer to peer dynamic to a peer to manager dynamic and navigating some of the challenges around that. What has really been your mentality around that change in the time that you've been in this position?
That's a good question, because I think when I started thinking leadership, I didn't think I would stay on my same team. I just didn't think there'd be that opportunity. So then when an opportunity was to stay on my team, that's something I had to think long and hard about, because it's going from, like you said, from peer to manager. And, I think my guiding rule is treat people how I want to be treated. So I approached it. My mentality was, if, someone on my team was promoted and now I was reporting to them, so my peer and my friend is now my manager, how would I want that situation to be handled? So I kind of took that approach and just tried to be very open and honest about the change in the dynamic a little bit. But kind of just took the approach that, always before, even as a peer, I was there to support them. And now as a manager, I get to support them just in a different degree or a different level of support. So I'm still there to support them and champion them and help them be the best that they can be. And also at the same time, I ask for their support, because to be successful together, we need to support each other. And then also just talked about feedback. That really, my role is to give feedback, but their role is to give me feedback as well. And that's how we improve together and really build upon the strong team that we already have. But I have to say that was one thing that probably gave me the most pause about pursuing an internal promotion within my own team. And when I thought about it, I knew the people that are my peers that are now, reporting to me, I knew they would be the most phenomenal people about it, and they have been. And so it's been an easy transition. I don't know if that's always the situation, but for me, I feel like I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky. And so far, it's been very, very good.
Good. Well, I would venture to guess, just knowing the team at Regeneron and knowing you, that they wouldn't have sought you out for leadership unless they thought that was going to be a good transition.
Yeah.
such a sweet person. I'm sure they had all the confidence that it would go beautifully. So now they're on the other side of it. There are many people who tell me that they want to move into management or maybe even like medical strategy, a medical director role. And they go through the interview process, and they're asked a lot of situational questions that they don't really have a frame of reference for, because they've never interviewed for that kind of a position. What kinds of questions are you typically asked about for these leadership management type positions?
What we just talked about was probably the number one question that I did receive, because the way we did it, I interviewed with several different people during the process, and so that was something that came up, is how am I going to handle that, and so that was probably the number one question that I did get. Second, probably most popular question was how do you build a high performing team? How do you maintain a high performing team? Those are really probably some of the top two questions that I did get. Another question was, why did I want this role? Like, why now, and why this role? And is this the next step on the ladder for me? Like, am I using this as a stepping stone, or is this really what I want to be doing?
I have a quick question for you, just in talking about how you made that transition from MSL to leader. Ashley has the benefit of knowing your background a little bit better. You and I just met today, so I'm enjoying getting to learn a little bit more about you. But in looking at your LinkedIn, I've seen the progression that your career took and led you to this leadership role. So as part of the companies and teams that led up to this role, were there attributes of leaders that you saw that you wanted to emulate as a leader? And are there things that you saw in your leadership coming up as an MSL all the way through leadership that maybe you're modeling or doing to establish yourself as the leader?
That's a really good question, because I always try to, when I'm really moved by what somebody does, I'm like, what did they do? What's that characteristic? And try to file away. Probably one thing I want to develop, I don't know if it's emulate yet, but I want to develop is this perceptiveness or insightfulness, because throughout my career, I've had managers and colleagues who have identified something to me that I didn't see myself or didn't believe I could do, and found a way to build that skill within me. So then I'm like, oh, I can do that. So it's just this insightfulness, and then being able to pull that out and develop it. That's really what I want to develop. But as far as those characteristics to emulate, I think when I look at the managers that I really have the most respect for, it's that they're approachable. And open, and they're honest, and they're really good about delivering feedback, even that hard feedback, having those conversations. So I think those are some of the top qualities that I want to emulate, and have someone see those in me and want to emulate after me as well. But I also think it's the working with integrity, just watching those interactions, and just the connections that my managers have had, and I watch those connections, how they connect with people, how they connect those people with other people, and just really broaden kind of the scope of knowledge.
You brought up a good point about the connecting people with other people. Brings me into my next thought, which is the networking, of course. That is so important in the MSL role. Of course, it's so important in this industry. You can see all the blogs and posts and all the free content that's out there, but networking is at the end of the day going to be the most important thing. So one question that we like to ask every one of our guests is just what tips or tricks or success stories maybe you've had in the networking arena?
Because I would not be where I am today without some networking. I will be completely honest with you. I think my tips are: be yourself, be kind, and never discount an interaction or an introduction. Because the person who actually got me into medical affairs, I met her. We realized we had worked for the same company. She was in ophthalmology. I did not think that is where my medical affairs career would take me. I was more diabetes or neurology, but we just had a good conversation. I just enjoyed visiting with her at the conference that we were attending. And if I had just kind of blown that away, like she can't really do anything for me, if I had that mentality, then I wouldn't be where I'm at today. But I think it's just having that, being honest in yourself with everybody is one of my biggest tips. And then also, you bring up a good point. There's so much information out there about networking and different blogs say this and that, but I feel build your network that works for you. My network is intentionally small because I really want to nurture and cultivate those relationships. With those that are in my network. And that's important to me. That's just how I operate. I know others have a really large network. And if that works for them, that is great. So kind of feel like, identify what you want your network to be and just do what's true to yourself. And for me, it's that smaller network. And it's worked well for me up to this point.
Well, one last question to wrap us up, kind of tying into Linda's question and something you said earlier. You mentioned that mentors played a pretty big role in your career, coming into industry. And then once you were identified as somebody your company was looking at for leadership, helping you to really think through the realities of this role you were going to be stepping into, mentors played a big role in your career and at different points. What would you suggest to somebody who is looking for a mentorship relationship? What qualities should they look for in that mentor?
Yeah, that's a really good question because the mentor that I rely on the most, we were actually matched through a MAPS program. There was a mentorship program and I was still early in my career. So I applied and we were matched together. And it's been a phenomenal relationship. But I think, when you're identifying a mentor, for me, it's nice having somebody outside of my company because they are completely just in it for me. There's no company bias to maybe what they're saying. And there's an internal mentor like I have wants what's best for me, but also seeing it from the company lens as well. But having somebody who's outside of your company, even outside of your therapeutic area, gives you a completely new insight as well. And it's all about just what's best for me. I can have those open conversations. So I think for me, that was really very key in kind of our relationship. Also just somebody, who's very open and honest and, willing to champion me and pull me, kind of get me motivated in the right direction when maybe I'm hitting the skids, holding me accountable basically to what we had committed to when we started kind of that mentor-mentee relationship. And, somebody with a flexible schedule. We don't always have the same meeting time or, like the fourth Friday of every month. It's flexible based on his schedule and my schedule. And I think that's important as well. It's kind of establishing a cadence, but also understanding that it needs to be flexible.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for all of your tips. I have so enjoyed getting to watch the progression of your career. That's my favorite part of our position as recruiters is, the people we work with early on in their career, just kind of seeing what it evolves into. And so I so treasure our relationship and friendship and you coming on as our first MSL 411 podcast guest. So very exciting. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you so much. Because Ashley, as I always say, I would not be where I am if it weren't for you. So I greatly appreciate the relationship and that we stay in contact and we have opportunities like this to connect.
Always, always. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of MSL 411. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share the link, let your friends know, and of course, connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you want more information on today's topic, please feel free to reach out. Be sure to check back soon as we continue to explore the topics that matter most to you in medical affairs.